Hello, welcome to episode number 3 of Isildur Shack. We have my co host on, Terilien,
Hi.
and two guests, Sir Karp, whom
Hello.
you may know him from his YouTube channel, which I think is called by the same name. In any case, I'll be posting the link in the episode description when I upload it. And there's Mythic. Mythic runs a very famous Twitter account, and he has one of the most impressive compilations of X Files creepy green text stories. So, welcome to the show, guys.
Hello, hello. Thank you.
So, what are we going to be talking about today?
Cryptids.
Hidden
Everything
and
to do with
unknown
cryptids.
animals. Hidden and
Yes.
unknown animals.
Yes.
Hidden unknown animals. Yes. So, while this might seem like a bit of a departure from our usual focus on Tolkien, remember that human knowledge is so limited and the unknown is so widespread that we have no idea. So many years on, it's like 7 or 8 decades on, we have no idea who or what Tom Bombadil is, right? We have no idea who it is. Tom Bombadil is the ultimate cryptid.
Oh my gosh. Please, just kill yourself, nerd. Just die in a ditch or something.
Terilien, I believe you told me that the ultimate shame of Lord of the Rings is that there's all the other stuff other than Tom Bombadil. And the more you read it, the more you want everything else to be edited out and the Tom Bombadil section to be extended into an entire book.
Yes, the more you read it, the more you realize that Tom Bombadil is actually the best part of Lord of the Rings, and it's awesome, and Tom Bombadil is a Chad. So, yeah.
I mean, he single-handedly curb stomps the Barrow-wites, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't even have to touch them. He just sings a retarded song, and the Barrow-wites just dissolve into thin air.
So, do you think that the Mothman and Tom Bombadil are indeed one?
So, if Tom Bombadil is Vishnu, then the following are his avatars. There's Ungoliant, who is the first avatar of Tom Bombadil. Mothman, who is the second avatar of Tom Bombadil. The third avatar is Charles Coulomb. And the fourth avatar, who coexists with the third avatar, and his name is a Knight Errant, whom we haven't heard from for a while, so we all hope he's okay.
Well, yeah. Anyway.
So we'll be rambling at length.
Do you guys want me to go into what a cryptid is yet?
I think I can give like a formal definition, and then you can elaborate on it.
Okay.
Yep, that works.
Cryptid comes from the Greek kryptos, which means hidden, and it refers to any animal or alleged animal which has been reported but which is not documented to the satisfaction of the scientific community.
Okay, so
New Zealand, for example.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Anyway, how do you begin with this? So, the delineation between what you could say would be cryptozoology and what would be normal zoology probably starts in the 1950s with this guy, Bernard Hofmans, who comes up with the definition of cryptozoology. And he has this colleague, Ivan T. Sanderson, who's kind of more outlandish than Hofmans. Hofmans is a very materialistic kind of person. He's a Belgian, and Sanderson was a Scottish man. But the two of them are kind of credited with starting cryptozoology in the 1950s and the 1960s. It was Hofmann's definition. But really, if you go back to zoological books and tracts and articles from the 19th century and the early 20th century, things that would have been under the preview of cryptozoology, or at least parts of cryptozoology, would have been in normal zoology. Also, the idea of the study of the Fortean, am I pronouncing that right, Terilien?
Can you spell it?
No, I'm not very good.
So, the Fortean magazine?
Yes. So the study of strange and unexplainable stuff, you could say it begins there. And cryptozoology, what became cryptozoology, is also part of that. So cryptozoology, as it would be today, has its one foot in being an actual science, of being zoology, while there's another foot of being the study of folklore. And it's going to be called a pseudoscience. And it's sad because there's some times where cryptozoology, when you look at Hoffman's work, and somebody like, if I'm going to pronounce his name, Carl Schucker, if you look at their work, or sometimes say Lauren Coleman, their work is very scientific. But at the same time, you'll have lots of young Earth creationists who are looking for the dinosaurs to prove young Earth creation, and they kind of throw garbage into it. And sometimes they're looking after real, credible animals like a thylacine, and they're doing so in a scientific way, which would be scientific. Other times it would be pure pseudoscience when they're looking at something which you can't really observe, some kind of paranormal creature. And the problem with zoology, or cryptozoology, that is all over the place. If you're picking up something about cryptozoology, is it going to be talking about how Bigfoot can use telekinesis? Or is it going to be talking about how there's woodpeckers that people have been seeing that are supposed to be extinct for 70 years? And there's this spectrum. So that's kind of the problem, is it's hidden animals, and that can be 4 categories of animals that you're looking after, I would say. The first one is going to be a Lazarus taxon. That is an animal that is believed to be extinct but is found alive. And this is where it gets to something that could be very plausible from a zoological point of view. The thylacine, or the Tasmanian tiger, an animal that I believe was declared extinct in Australia in 1986. 2 days ago, a bunch of cryptozoologists who have not released a video to my knowledge yet claim to have video of a thylacine family on a game cam. There's numerous videos of alleged thylacines on game cams, thousands to possibly tens of thousands of sightings of it. So that would be a credible Lazarus taxon, but it goes into the uncredible stuff where there's people that believe that there's living dinosaurs. So that would be the first type of animal. Then you have vagrant species. And this is really interesting. This is where you would begin to have something invasive, or it's an animal in a place where it shouldn't be. So this is often alien big cats are a pretty big example, which is one of the most common cryptids, is people seeing mountain lions in the United Kingdom, people seeing tigers in Canada. And there are logical explanations for that. If you ever saw Tiger King, and how many tigers there are in the United States is more than there are tigers in the wild. So that's pretty logical. But there's also stuff like kangaroos are seen throughout the United States all the time. So that would be a vagrant species. Saltwater creatures that live in the Great Lakes, like bull sharks in the Great Lakes, which could be Champ could be a bull shark. Or a sea lion could be the Loch Ness Monster. That could be a vagrant species. And then the third one you'd get into, and this is the one that most people think about cryptids are going to look into, and that's going to be unknown animals. An animal that would be unknown to science. And that's where you get into, it kind of moves away from stuff that we could really prove. And you're going into the Bigfoot category, the Yeti category, these animals that would be physical animals, but they would be completely unknown to science and probably be a new genus. And when you're going out into this third category, this is where you're shifting from stuff that's pretty credible into that pseudoscience category. And I don't mean to be mean. Maybe Bigfoot will end up being real, a real ape. And a lot of the times you have people that are, if they're going after something like the Mokele and Mbembe, and they're basically creating this urban legend and just creating this feedback loop that's creating a pseudoscience, and that's a problem with this. And then finally, the fourth category is outright supernatural animals, something like the Mothman or the Chupacabra, which can't really be explained in terms of a material animal. Some people, myself, sometimes will put Bigfoot in that category because Bigfoot has a lot of supernatural stuff that can go along with it. But this fourth category is very eye-catching, but this would fall completely out of the physical sciences, and it goes more into that ghost hunting, ufology territory, and something that's completely unprovable, something you can never find evidence for, the Goat Man, the Mothman, and so on. So that's kind of my breakdown of my four categories. If we want to talk about those categories or shift into talking about how the paranormal monsters of cryptozoology fit in the Catholic cosmology.
Okay, so number one, people see kangaroos in the United States.
Yeah, phantom kangaroos are pretty common.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
because they'll escape, for example.
Yeah, so people, some people would say there could be unknown kangaroos, or there could be escaped kangaroos, and they have breeding populations. For instance, I think in France and the United Kingdom, there's breeding populations of wallabies, which are invasive species that actually have been successful. They aren't quite as invasive as wild hogs in the United States, aren't quite as successful as them, but they're able to have a breeding population in the wild. So some of those vagrant species are the beginnings of an invasive population.
I mean, if you're talking about successful invasive species, you just have to look at the koi carp. You need only a couple, and within a very short period of time, they're going to fill up entire rivers. I think this has happened in the Everglades region more than once. I do remember seeing a news report about it not too long ago.
Yeah, there is Everglades is now there's highly successful Burmese pythons in the Everglades.
See, there you go. So as Catholics, so I mean, you don't have to a special place in any kind of cosmology if you're talking about things like the Coelacanth, a fish that was supposedly extinct for tens of millions of years, but they found living fossils of, well, not living fossils, but living specimens of.
That would be an example of a radical Lazarus taxon.
Yeah, so you don't need to appeal for any special place in that kind of cosmology, but type 4, the more obviously preternatural entities, supposing they exist, where do you think, and I'm asking this question of the three of you, where do you think would they exist?
Like, how do they fit into our cosmology? Like, are they
Yes.
demons? Are they angels? Are
Yeah,
they
yeah.
possessed? Are they separate
Yeah.
creations?
Yeah. I mean, just a short answer now, because we do have a segment planned out where we talk about this at some length.
Well,
So,
there are several suggestions. So one is that they are the result of demonic possession or demonic shenanigans,
mhm.
right? A demon possessing a corpse might be the basis for vampires, for example. A demon possessing a particular living individual might be the source for something like werewolves. The various kinds of demonic activity could be the basis for, various forms of shape-shifting creatures or monsters that we've documented. And you can throw a lot of stuff into this category. Another one that people have suggested is that there were angels that didn't take a side before when Lucifer rebelled, and that they have a kind of intermediate position and are often responsible for whatever supernatural activity seems to be relatively ambiguous or benign in character. So That would be another example.
Mhm.
And that's something that comes up often. And while it is heterodox, there is some patristic and theological basis for it. Although how much there is hotly debated among people in these circles, and my friends included. I think I'll pass it to Serp.
Yeah, I remember we were talking about this the other day, Terilien, and you were talking about the possibility of a dragon being a possessed chicken. Could you elaborate on that, for example?
Well, I know that sounds kind of goofy, but if you look at various older depictions of Saint George and the Dragon, you don't have these gigantic, beautiful reptilian creatures. What you have are fairly small, maybe dog-sized or lamb-sized or cow-sized, deformed creatures that often look, maybe bird-like or like frogs or something like that. They really aren't the kind of romanticized dragons that you see in, things like Tolkien or A Song of Ice and Fire. They're really, really disgusting and abominable creatures that look very incoherent and even sick. And so, who knows? Maybe a cockatrice is literally just a rooster that got possessed by a demon and went around causing trouble for people, and its size was exaggerated or increased by demons. I mean, we know demons can deform people and make them physically strong when they possess them. Why not do similar things to a rooster?
Yeah, all this goes to show that Tard's strength is diabolical in origin.
Yeah. And I mean, in the absence of a documented breeding population, because there are many cases where you might have a monster which you would expect to have a breeding population if it has been attested throughout the centuries and thus be more frequently seen. In the absence of that, you can only really appeal to the supernatural, and that's one thing you can appeal to.
Yeah.
All right.
Does Mythic have anything to add?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at like a lot of the stories and folklore around different cryptids, like there's ones that like indicate that it's more than likely of a demonic origin, like things like skinwalkers and wendigos and werewolves. They just seem always evil, almost. So you gotta, I err on the side that those are of some kind of demonic origin. Whether they're, like skinwalkers, whether they're like possessed witch doctors who trade their humanity for preternatural powers and basically become like demons. But then you have other things like you stated, like things that are more benign. And that's where the middle angels, like who didn't choose a side, would come in. And that's, I guess you could say, stuff like the fae or gnomes or stuff out of folklore. I mean, there's a common belief in the Middle Ages that the fae were middle angels that didn't choose a side and were kind of cursed to live in this like in between existence, I guess.
You also have the fawns, for example, that Saint Anthony met in the desert.
Yeah, the satyr and the centaur. Like that's a big one. I mean, and the weirdest thing about that is the satyr like asked Saint Anthony to pray for him and his people. Like he was one of the things that the Gentiles worshipped as a god. Asking for prayers from a saint doesn't seem to be something evil.
Well, as it says in 1 John, test all the spirits, and he says, whichever spirit says Jesus Christ is Lord is from God, and whichever denies him or refuses to acknowledge him is not from God. In this case, it would seem that this can't really be a demon. Maybe it's a spurious tale, but in this kind of context, it can't really be a demon.
I think, the satyr spoke to him, and the centaur just, like, yelled some incoherent babble at him and, like, pointed in a direction. So there's, like, debate whether, like, one of them was demonic and the other one was something else.
So
that's interesting. I mean, it's interesting that the centaur would not say anything because I mean
he said something, but it was in an unknown like language.
Well, there's also other accounts where, for example, fairies actually often can't speak human language,
Yeah.
but they could sort of imitate it or say certain things which would indicate that language is very, very closely tied to having a rational nature and having a rational soul, so to speak. And so there is the suggestion that some of these liminal or elemental beings are a type of
Semi-rational.
close to rational, but they're like a type of animal created by certain angels or by God that is just extremely rare and doesn't exactly have a nature that we can accommodate into a naturalistic framework as we understand it. Even if they might not be properly speaking supernatural. You know, like an elemental creature, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And that these might have been intended as beings that would act as caretakers of the environment, for example, before the fall, and afterwards they became isolated to just a few locations. That's one suggestion I've heard.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. And I mean, we have on good authority that elementals are real since Tim punched one in the face.
Yeah, and I mean, that guy's a turbo trad and a rigorous Augustinian, so it can't be a heretical position if he believes it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I cannot claim to have had a run-in with any elemental creature, but which is surprising, seeing as I come from India.
Oh,
And
but one time you saw a fish.
yeah, that I will be talking about that, but that I it was just that was more weird than anything. But
Yeah, we can explain that one
yeah,
later.
yeah, we can. You know, though, what's it's surprising that um even some um so if we say that liminal beings are either actually or are descended from uh, angels who refuse to take a side, it's it's quite interesting that they would in that case be afraid of of objects that are imbued with sacred power. For instance, crucifixes are supposed to scare away the she in Ireland. Um,
All of them, without exception, or just certain segments of them?
um, they just do not approach you if you have a crucifix on your person, or if you are carrying any blessed salt or any kind of a missile or whatever. um so so it is interesting that they would be repelled by such sacramentals. So that I mean
Which
that kind
tends to throw a spanner in the idea that they would be neutral angels rather than demons, for
yeah,
example.
yeah. um so 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 I have this very interesting book by Brian Frood, um and it's illustrated by Alan Lee, and the illustrations are beautiful. It says that if you one of the sections says, if you mark a a loaf of bread with a cross, then fairies will not dance on it. They will not take it. They will be dissuaded from taking any loaf of bread that's marked with a cross. And that's just that's definitely interesting to think about. Yeah, so we don't know what such liminal beings are, but we do know that they tend to occur around, um, or they tend to be associated with UFO sightings.
Yeah, there's a great overlap between UFOs and Fey folk and Bigfoot and all these supernatural cryptids and animals. And I mean, when you're talking about the Fortin and that kind of thing, is that there's huge overlap. So if you look like in 67 in Point Pleasant, where you have the Mothman, and then you have all these UFOs, all of the Men in Black. Men in Black, of course, to those who don't know, no, they aren't part of a government agency. They're very ignorant, very odd creatures that pretend to be men but aren't men. And then you have something like Skinwalker Ranch, where you have all these different weird things all happen, like it's some kind of energy of strangeness. And that kind of feeds back into this idea it's a demon that's doing it to trick people. Or it's like some kind of fairy doing it that would be like a middle angel that's fallen to the earth that's doing it to trick people.
Can I say something about the Men in Black?
Yes.
It's very interesting, Serp, that you would bring up the energy, the atmosphere of strangeness, because I don't believe I have read any account as unsettling as those of the Men in Black, as reported by John Keel in his book on the Mothman, which is called the Mothman Prophecies. Now, Keel says that the Men in Black would be dressed very formally in black suits with black overcoats and black caps or black top hats or whatever. However, they would be totally bereft of social graces. They would walk into a diner, right, and then they would pick up a salt shaker, and they would go up to the counter and ask things like, "What's this salt shaker? Can I keep it? Can I keep it?" And then they would just leave. They would just ride around in sedans, stop at diners and shops and so places, and places like that, and they would express a very strange, very unaccountable interest in just tiny daily things, a paper clip or a pen or something equally small, and they would just request to keep them, and they would not know how to use a knife and fork, for example. So again,
You want to go into Valise and Keel's understanding of UFO knots as opposed to aliens?
yeah, I will in a few seconds, but I just I can't help but wonder if the FBI and the CIA aren't actually hiring cripplingly autistic people as their Men in Black. So
Well, Vali talks about this in terms of, so Vali does not believe in what he calls the extraterrestrial hypothesis to UFOs.
yeah,
And this goes into the idea that UFOs could be demons or could be fairies or it's some kind of force tricking people. But this is the more supernatural understanding of UFOs. When UFOs come down, and Vali talks about this, and this goes into the concept of high strangeness. Oftentimes, the UFO cases that have the most validity are those of high strangeness, which would not make sense for an alien to come down to the Earth and do something like aliens come down to the Earth and steal potted plants. So when we go to Mars and we set rovers down on Mars and we take a few samples or we take a few samples of the moon, are we going over and over again hundreds of times to steal potted plants? Or are we sending out a few things to map out the planet and then just leave? And
Exactly, yes.
so, for instance, Vali talks about this one in excruciating detail at the beginning of Passport to Magnolia, is this UFOs that come down. I think it was in Iowa to this farmer's farm, and he lived by himself. And they come down, and they're these like they look like Italians, is what he described them as. These
Hmm.
small Italians that came out of a UFO, and they ask him for water, and he gives them water, and in return they give him buckwheat cakes. He had the buckwheat cakes, and he gave them to the FBI to examine. So that means that this case has an extremely high level of validity because he had the buckwheat cakes and he gave them to be examined. Buckwheat cakes are like a certain type of pancake, by the way. But this is high strangeness.
Yeah.
And oftentimes what happens with UFOologists is that they throw away the high strangeness and they took the less viable or
Well attested.
well-attested cases, and they try to make systems out of that, and they're trying to systemize it and create these grays and stuff. But all these gray cases, right? These aren't very valid. The valid cases are the strange things, that the Italians looking for water from outer space, or the
I
Mothman.
think a case in point for this would be the Voronezh incident, which you know
That's the
about.
Voronezh incident. Again, very extremely well attested to. Hyper high strangeness. Do you want to talk about that, Terilien?
I don't remember all the details, but basically, aliens came to a playground, I think, in Russia, in front of dozens of people, and they all reported seeing it. And these aliens just did a bunch of these seeming aliens did a bunch of strange things that it would just make no sense whatsoever.
Well, they use metal rods like wands to like lift children in the air and stuff like that.
Yes.
And they're dressed like 1950s like monsters from like this is in late 80s Russia and the collapse of the Soviet Union. And something is really interesting about the collapse of the Soviet Union is all their UFO stuff at that very end, we have it. And they're literally taking this stuff serious, trying to use the UFO hypothesis and trying to figure out this. And they literally go, this is just chaos. We can't understand this.
Yeah. So that's one of the biggest problems that you run into when it comes to studying cryptozoology or UFOs and the like, is that a lot of people, they insist very, very strongly on scientific explanations, and they want to accommodate it to a paradigm in which these beings are, extraterrestrials trying to explore the Earth. But in doing so, they either end up needing to mutilate or completely throw out a lot of the best attested evidence and rely on a lot of more poorly attested stuff that's more obviously made up or can more obviously be explained alternately. And that's a major point of Jacques Vallée's book, Passport to Magonia.
Yeah.
As well as Keel. Keel and Vallée, I don't know if they knew each other or ever collaborated, but their hypotheses are almost identical, I would say.
And what's most charming about them is that they don't present any strong hypotheses to begin with. They just express their utter helplessness in the face of all of this evidence, all of this lore, which I find quite refreshing when compared to most scientists, right? Who say, "Oh, they must be extraterrestrials who want to come over and carry out cartographic analysis of Earth," or "Oh, maybe they took the buckwheat cake because they wanted to find out how carbohydrates work or something." On the other hand, strange behavior is very well attested in the case of the Fey folk. For example, there's this village in County Durham in England called Ebchester. Um, around around that village, there's this bogey called the Headley Cove. It would often appear, and sightings go back to the 17th century. Um, he would often appear and he would present himself to, let's say, some old lady gathering firewood, and he would transform himself into a truss of straw. And the lady, when she bent over to pick up, um, when she would bend over to pick up that truss of straw, this creature would disappear. And then from a distance, you would hear a very loud, very obnoxious, braying laughter, and that would be it. Now, it just it's just so removed from the paradigm of rationality as we understand it, that we are left confused. Now, when you talk about extraterrestrials making scientific expeditions to Earth, right, or sending ahead scouting ships or whatever, you are expecting them to act under the paradigm of a scientific rationality and mindset, but that doesn't really, that doesn't gel with the behavior that they have actually shown.
Scientists don't travel interstellar distances to ask for a paperclip or a um or
Or
to
a
give people
ballpoint pen,
buckwheat,
yeah. Yeah.
or to give people buckwheat, or to cause a kid to levitate in the air and then
Or to
roam
warn
around.
school children about global warming in the middle of Africa.
Yeah, or to sexually violate people, if you're into those sorts of tales, or to take them to
Or
some.
to cut out guts from cows in the middle of North Dakota and Montana.
Yeah.
Yeah, cattle mutilation is another, it's another of those
Tropes.
Here's the
phenomena.
thing when we talk about this too, is these are so bizarre, these cases, that it leads credence to them in high strangeness. Because how do you make it up? If you're going to make up this report, you're going to say, I was abducted by aliens in my house, and they look like gray aliens, and they told me exactly where they were, right? And they pointed on a map where I was, and so on and so forth, right? The is it Benny Hill abduction, the first gray abduction?
Possibly.
Yeah.
And you're going, and then this gets recreated as like this copycat of this, talking about this abduction. You're not going to say it was a cat person who, like, it was a female cat person that raped me, and here's all the strange burns that can't be explained by science.
Yeah. Or it was a dog shaped like a banana that raped me.
Yeah. Start to get started.
So where we left off, we were talking about abductions, correct?
Correct, yes.
So we were talking about the Barney and Betty Hill abduction, and about how all the grays come from this. There is some strange stuff that occurred in the Betty and Barney Hill abduction itself, but I don't know if you want to go off into talking about Scientology or anything. But most abduction stories, again, are something that's done through suggestive hypnosis. So I would say, scientifically speaking, are pretty much worthless. But most people, when they tell of abductions, they're going into the same set of stories, and a lot of time these stories, and they don't mash up with what's really occurring. But they don't have as high credibility because there'll be less witnesses. But the ones that will have more witnesses, and where you have higher quality witnesses, and witnesses that don't have any reason to lie, and where things are left behind, usually are instances of high strangeness.
Right. All right. Do you suppose that something happened during the, well, between the 1950s and the 1960s, when the narrative regarding extraterrestrials and UFOs changed from um, the benign space brother, such as in the Michael Rennie uh, movie. It's
Or
called
like or like Nordic aliens.
well,
From my understanding, I haven't read enough The problem is there's not very much historiography about ufology. I have one historiographical book, and I think that you read it as well, because I suggested it to you. But it
yeah,
seems, from my understanding, that from the 80s onwards, that these creatures became increasingly more dangerous and scarier.
yeah,
In the 1950s and the 40s,
because
before the abductee thing, there were contactees, and contactees are the entire culture of it basically changed from contactees to abductees into the being
exactly, yeah.
cattle mutilations and high strangeness and getting weirder and scarier.
I mean, in 1951, you had this movie, or was it in 1955? No, it wasn't in 51. It was in 55. It's called the Day the Earth Stood Still, where um, benign aliens come to Earth and then they tell people to not proceed along a certain course of action, which is sure to bring a ruin upon everyone. And from there, and from movies like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and even E.T. as late
Very
as,
positive. Very
yeah,
positive.
very positive, right? And E.T. was as late as 1982. Again, I might be getting my dates wrong, but we can obviously look it up at some point. From there, you go to that so that Charlie Sheen movie. It what was it called? It was in the early '90s, I think.
I don't think that it's Charlie Sheen that made that movie, but you're talking about Fire in the Sky.
Um, well, I could be talking about that. There's also the one that Charlie Sheen acted in. What's it called again? It's called the Arrival, in which in which um in which the which what happens is, okay, so the scene in ET was there's this con there's this contactee, right? And he established a rapport with the alien in question. However, in this movie, um the alien is now placed several layers um beyond the potential contactee. He now has to navigate through increasingly dangerous um, military and government outfits, and what he finds in the end is he can't even make sense of what he finds in the end. It's that confusing.
I
And
think kind of a big focal point in the change in the view of UFO knots, I think even more than if we're going to pinpoint that movie, is actually Whitley Strieber
yeah,
and Communion.
yeah,
It's pretty. I mean, you've read Stryber. I haven't actually read that much of Stryber's fiction as a horror fan. That makes me an imbecile, but it's intriguing to note that Stryber was a well-known horror author. He wrote The
Stryber,
Hunger and Wolfen, and
and
he
he
was an
wrote The Night
established
Church.
writer. The Night Church as well. Um,
And he did also write a number of millenarian uh, uh, fiction. He wrote the 2012 series, so War for Souls and all of that. So that's basically Y2K, but so it's basically Y2K left behind fiction, but much
mhm.
but much more insane, and with 2012, and there's a lot of he. So Whitley Strieber, he reads like a very seriously disturbed man. That's all I'm going to say. And um, now there's this book.
Can I return to Stryber though? I want to.
Oh
I
yeah,
want to
please,
talk about.
please. Um,
So
I,
Stryber was
I
a
was.
horror fiction writer. Who was pre-established as a horror fiction writer, and then he
Uh-huh.
comes out in '87 and says, "This is a real thing that happened to me," which already casts a lot of doubt onto it. But Communion was a huge hit, and Communion is a much more terrifying ordeal than you would see in Travis Walton's pretty scary, and that's where Fire in the Sky, the film, comes from.
Mhm.
But of course, the culture would have existed with Close Encounters of the Third Kind versus Communion is like day and night.
Yeah.
So if you want to go ahead to where you were before.
Oh, I was just going to say that there is this psychiatrist guy who wrote a book called Abduction, which is basically his own studies over a couple of decades of abductee reports. He suggested, and this is something that's going to interest everyone here. He says that that a couple of people that he knew, whom he saw in his capacity as a psychiatrist, they both of these people experienced an encounter with aliens. One of them soon after viewing a TV program based on Stryber's Communion. The other was abducted after reading the book. So shortly after he read the book, he was abducted. Now, um, I'm just saying that the cover picture in Schreiber's book, there are some people, I think it was probably John Mack himself, who described the cover image as depicting, the classic gray alien features. He described them as a wise and far-seeing. But I've always found that image very unsettling. Now, we know that certain highly charged demonic images have a certain um, potent life of their own. So I think those, it could very well be that those um, abduction experiences that John Mack's two patients experienced were a direct result, or maybe, yeah, or something of that sort. Because, yeah, you know what I'm getting at, right?
So you're implying that the demonic imagery implied by Schreiber and others is kind of infecting people through occult means.
He It certainly was infecting a lot of people throughout the second half of the 1980s and throughout the 1990s. And now they seem to have dropped off, because as I was remarking in the group chat a couple of days ago, um, public interest in UFOs
Has
noticeably
sustained.
evaporated after 2005, 2006. So, um being just look at
So,
the. Go on.
how would you respond to the idea that this is just a psychological phenomenon that takes different forms depending on what's popular in the media or broader culture? Something that, back in the day, it would take the form of fairies or something else that was a bit weird that people believed in, and now it takes the form of aliens.
Right.
How would you respond to that and substantiate the idea that instead it's, these other beings, say demons or whatever, who are instead aping these popular tropes and the like?
I believe that's directly what Valet says, is that they're
Yeah,
some kind of other entity which is aping what appears in popular culture.
Yeah.
because Jacques Vallée says something that's, I think, absolutely crucial to understanding um, a liminal phenomena like this. He says, and he's talking about UFOs, but it has a much wider applicability. He says that UFOs are, quote, constructed both as physical craft and as psychic devices. Now, what would you make of that, Terilien?
What would I make of that?
Yeah,
I
both
have
the
no
psychic.
idea what to make of it. Yeah, I really have no idea what to think about that thesis. Could you elaborate on what he means exactly?
So, um, so, so basically, um, Jacques Vallée's conclusion over the course of his books is that, you know, based on on a statistical analysis of those sightings that are the most convincing, and that have the most witnesses, they can't be interplanetary spaceships, right? UFOs have to be something else because there are simply too many of them. It's not likely for a civilization to send astronauts who would, over the course of several decades, abduct about 2 million Americans. What astronauts, what civilization would create an astronaut, would create a core of astronauts that would just abduct millions of people? Doesn't make sense. There are physical proofs of UFOs, right? But they aren't exactly what you would expect. They're anomalous, okay?
Hmm?
And
They're Burns and butt wheat cakes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. It just doesn't make sense. Now, Father Seraphim Rose, he says that it's very possible that there could be, occult groups in our operations, um, in operation all around the world, who could produce phenomenon similar to those produced by UFOs. Um, he he compares those anomalous phenomenon um, to those produced by sorcerers of antiquity. I do not know how much sense that makes, but I would not be surprised if Seraphim Rose had actually hit the nail on the head with that one. So I, I suppose that the more important question is, what are the points of commonality, right? I mean, Jacques Vallée does show throughout his books that that there were many points of similarities between fairy encounters and encounters with UFOs. Certain instances, certain patterns of high strangeness. Now, do you think these patterns would apply to seeing other cryptids as well? Sasquatches and Bigfoot and dogmen or whatnot, right? I mean, what what's the common thread connecting cryptids and UFOs and fairy activity? Do you have any insight on
Well, if you
this at
talk
all?
about something like Skinwalker Ranch, this same activity, it's like hot spots of activity, like that there's some kind of energy or hot spot for it. And this is kind of seen again and again in certain places. Certain places will have Bigfoots, but also UFOs seen there. Kind of something like a haunting, right?
Yeah,
A haunting of a physical area, like a large physical area, results in these otherworldly creatures or UFOs and UFO knots. Something I'd like to note with the connection between fairies and UFO knots is the abduction of children, or the taking of sperm and eggs to create half-breed children. This was something that was seen a lot with fairies, and something that's seen a lot with UFO knots and alien abductions.
It's something that was also explored at length in some of the later seasons of X Files. So, of the X Files. So, um, yeah, we do see that. Yeah, th- there is there is a certain fascination with the human body, which is fairly strange, but that does seem to be a very common theme. Um, Whitley Strieber talks about this in Communion. He does describe in a very graphic manner how the um, how the probes and such work.
Ooh,
Yeah, yeah,
that's
um,
pretty creepy.
yeah. It is. So
So you on the camp that Whitley Strieber might have been talking about real experiences, and that
um
he's a deeply disturbed man, or with the
um
occult or something?
I mean, Schreiber was a practicing Catholic to the best of my knowledge, but he's lapsed now. And okay, let me say this: the Night Church, the Night Church might be his sickest book yet. Okay, it's a deeply, deeply, deeply disturbing book. Ab- it's I would say it's more disturbing than um, Communion. And yeah, I mean, just look at the name of Communion. I mean, just look at that name. You know, isn't it a demonic inversion of communion, of what communion stands for to us?
Hmm.
I think that I do not know if he was actually abducted by aliens, although he does say that he was abducted and he was raped by aliens um, when he was 7 or 8 years old, I think. Um, Even if that had not been the case, then we can say with a very great degree of certainty that he is a very disturbed man, and again, very likely to be demonically oppressed.
I see. So, if we can maybe move on to the next topic now. Uh,
Yeah, so my question is, okay, so we know what the patterns are that are common throughout such things, such phenomena. But what about the people who get abducted? I mean, have we ever had any high profile abductions or fairy or witnesses to fairy events, high profile Catholic abductees? In have any of the people who have come across these things been Catholic? I mean, does that often come up in any of
do they
the?
tend to be degenerates? Do they tend to be good people?
Yeah,
You know, people who meet Bigfoot also, like, what are their typical traits?
According to Keel, and Guide to Mysterious Beings, he said that a great many people are committing adultery when they see this stuff. Now, he didn't make anything of that. I don't believe that. I would assume he's agnostic or spiritual or something, like a non-Christian, but he obviously believes in metaphysical realities in his books. But he doesn't seem to have any Christianity or Judaism or any main religion. Um, as far as I know, I don't know anybody who would be very devout that has ever encountered um, this stuff. It seems to be, I would say, it seems to be people that are usually devout don't have these encounters. That being said, the sociological stuff I've heard is that people that have the encounters don't necessarily become atheists. Many times they'll maintain their religion, which is interesting as well. I have also heard that people that are abducted tend to be, it tends to run in families as if it were a curse. So if their parents would experience abductions, they would experience it, or it would be through a family line that people would experience abduction or abduction-like phenomenon. And it seems to be an inherited trait. Now, that could be a curse.
That sounds a lot like what Father Ripperger says about generational spirits,
Yeah.
which is a spirit that is attached to a particular family line and will tend to torment them and instill particular vices in them over the course of generations.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, a lot of the stories I've read from anyone who is Catholic or Christian, the strangeness generally seems to be of a very straightforward demonic nature, you know. And then you hear these stories of people who don't have a religion, and the experience is different. It makes you wonder, you know, if it's all just demons, and knowing that they're trying to trick the people who aren't Christian into presenting themselves as something else. Like a lot of the faith stories I read, like, you know, it's stories passed down from, you know, old pagan grandparents or something who keep the fairy folk, old fairy religion in Europe or something.
I've actually heard some stuff about, you know, encounters with Bigfoot, for example. And it's basically that Bigfoot is actually quite dangerous and unfriendly, apparently. Does anyone have any information they'd like to share on that?
I know if you go into the 411 stuff, Bigfoot is supposed to be an incredibly dangerous creature that you should stay away from at all times. So I think the most famous researcher of fairies themselves, I think he was an Anglican bishop. He might have been a priest in Scotland. I'm trying to figure out his name. He wrote The Secret Commonwealth.
Are you talking about Montague Summers?
Oh,
No, I know
Montague.
you're talking about.
It's Reverend Robert Kirk.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, Montague Summers was just a fraud.
Well,
Okay.
I don't know. I mean,
I
are we gonna
mean,
go off into the middle of nowhere to talk about Montague Summers?
no, but just long story short, there's no evidence he was ever actually ordained.
Well, he's probably an old Catholic.
Yeah, maybe he got old Catholic orders.
I think he was ordained an old Catholic.
Oh gosh, that is really sad.
I mean, that's not a rare thing. Most people that are into occultist or for hire exorcist are usually old Catholic.
Yeah, you actually do have this, to go on a bit of a tangent, you do have this phenomenon known as, these people known as streamers, who basically receive ordination from independent Catholics like the Old Catholic Church and other schismatic groups so that they can perform white magic. It's pretty messed up.
But you have to. This is a pretty old. That's definitely. It has hundreds and hundreds of years of history behind it.
Yeah, that's not surprising.
There were a lot of itinerant priests and bishops in the Middle Ages that would have done this sort of thing.
Yeah,
And
well,
curse people in funerals and.
yeah, well, for example, you know, you have people like the Pardoner in Chaucer, who's,
Right. Yeah.
you know, an unscrupulous guy who sells absolution.
Yeah. Which, by the way, is a very, very, very serious offense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, so
Mythic, what's the overlap between cryptids and missing 411? It's like look, we know that a lot of the stories, a lot of the green texts that people post on the paranormal boards on the chans are made up shit. I mean, we know that, but there are some though that have the ring of truth. Do you have any choice examples for us? I mean, that would shed some light on the on points of commonality with what we've been talking about so far.
I mean, they're all pretty all over the place. I think the best stories that I've read they don't even happen in America. Like, I recently posted one about a park ranger in Russia,
Hmm.
and I think you read this one about the deer.
Yeah.
Just all his stories revolved around these deer, and these deer just displayed very strange behavior. One guy in the thread actually pointed out that some of the behavior that they had was similar to like mad cow disease.
Right.
But as far as missing 411 goes, I mean, missing 411 always seems to be. I don't know. Does Politis even have a hypothesis at all?
From my understanding, he was originally trying to support stuff with Bigfoot, and then he doesn't have a hypothesis, and that he kind of leaves it hanging. Comes to my great shame. I've not actually read the book myself, or any of
I
the
haven't
sequels
either.
to it.
From my understanding, what David Paulides does is he again, I don't want to be mean to him, but it's just that, oh, maybe I will. Okay, so it's basically the publishing equivalent of erotic teasing. If you buy my next book, maybe you'll find the answers there. Maybe you'll find my hypothesis in the next episode of Dragon Ball Z or something.
Let's find out.
Yeah, let's find out on the next episode of Dragon Ball Z. Yeah, it's kind of like that. I mean, he he originally, as Menji said, he originally did want to push the Bigfoot hypothesis, but I don't think he stuck to it. And by the way, his work was debunked by some Reddit lady,
Yeah, I
who,
saw that.
yeah, who runs some skeptical inquirer
Did it actually?
thing.
Is it actually a convincing debunking?
No.
Debunkings are usually really unconvincing, like the Mothman's a giant owl and stuff like that,
Oh, okay. So you weren't.
and the
weren't being
swamp
serious.
gas and stuff.
So you weren't being serious then. Okay, I wasn't sure.
Politis seems like he's just pointing out that there's a lot of strange activity that happens in national parks and state parks, and that even our park service is aware of it and they cover it up.
Do you guys want to talk about favorite cryptids? Are we in that segment yet?
Um, I want to listen to you guys talk about the Mothman, which is my favorite cryptid.
Well, I would definitely say the Mothman is not a physical being. Definitely a supernatural creature, if not an outright demon.
He comes off that way for sure.
Of course, there's the catastrophic collapse of the bridge and the end of the Mothman sightings. Now, I guess some people would say that Keel basically created the Mothman. It's just kind of this thing that he attracted to, like, he took all these UFO sightings and everything, because they would say UFO flap, and then he created a story of it, and the Mothman's a creature of that story. Kind of like the historic graphical view that it was kind of created, and people will take this historical graphical view. Mokele and Bembe was created by like young Earth creationists trying to go to Africa and search for it. So it creates its own urban legend, and it's not very deep, and it didn't, right? And I mean, I don't know if that's true, because there's a lot of people who are still alive that talk about it, and they're on record of talking about seeing it. And I mean, Point Pleasant, it wasn't a very big town, but it had quite a bit of people see it, and quite a bit of people are on record of saying that they saw it.
Interesting.
I will believe literally anything that people tell me. I am at that point of my research degree where I don't care. I just want some content. So
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, Frere and I are both academics. I mean, I guess I also am an academic as well at this point. And nothing will dampen your confidence in the establishment and in debunkers quite like being one yourself.
yeah, it's like when I went up to some old ladies around Christmas, and I asked them to take off their masks, and I told them, I am an expert myself. Believe me, I don't know jack shit about anything, and you are much better off not believing experts, because I am one. I know how we function. We're all frauds, every last one of us. And
Yeah.
yes,
But I don't know, Mythic, do you know that much about Mothman sightings outside of Point Pleasant itself? Is the Chernobyl stuff, is that just internet garble? Is that just X of the Mothman at Chernobyl? Is the Mothman been seen in Chicago? I don't know that much stuff about Mothman outside of Point Pleasant.
well,
No, I
Thomas,
mean, the Chernobyl stuff is the only like similar stuff I've heard about Mothman, the giant vulture or whatever you want to call it at Chernobyl. But other than that, I actually don't know a whole lot about Mothman. I will admit I stay away from Mothman and Bigfoot. Anything that's like super mainstream, like I have no interest in. I hate to say it.
yeah. Oh yeah, that Russian sleep experiment copy pasta on our no sleep. Man, fuck you.
Well, I mean, no
Fucking
sleep is
moron.
basically a bunch of people who will flatly admit that they're just playing pretend.
No Sleep is just it's the exports, but it's just Reddit, so it's
It's Reddit, so it sucks.
Yeah,
I mean, everything about Reddit is terrible.
yeah.
I mean, who's gonna write a better scary story? A legitimate schizophrenic kid on the 4chan or some normie on Reddit?
But wouldn't even be a normie, it'd be a soy normie.
Yeah, I mean, normies are way better people than Redditors.
Yeah. And yeah, I am a schizo, so
Just so you guys
I
know,
do
he is-
regularly browse X, by the way.
I've never browsed it, funny enough.
Well, whenever I browse it, I usually just send you pictures of the latest iceberg memes.
I mean, those are great.
oh
Those
yeah,
are really
those are awesome. So
Half the posts are literally just dudes asking how to summon a succubus.
Which, I mean, if my experiences have told me anything, having sex with a succubus is extremely unpleasant.
Here's something else
oh
here.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, so okay, so rule of thumb from Isildur Shack. Every time you have a nocturnal emission, know that that's a succubus trying to harvest your semen to create a half human, half demon hybrid.
Based and schizopilled.
Based in schizophile.
Anyway, I was going to say that there is kind of a Christian minority on X.
Oh yeah?
I have noticed
Yeah.
that.
I assume that it's probably heavily Catholic and or Orthodox, but there is something that's interesting, and this has become kind of a big meme, and we're going off on a tangent here, is like neo-pagans aren't really a thing on X, and people have moved from like neo-paganism to like Gnosticism now.
Really?
And there's a lot more Gnostics on X, and like neo-pagans aren't really a thing anymore.
Is there a reason for that, you think?
Neo-paganism isn't a like the Brahmin religion wasn't very spiritually helpful, was it?
No, it wasn't.
So if you want to
It
be
wasn't,
fuck you
no.
dad, fuck you mom, fuck you dad kind of thing, well, it's better to be Gnostic than this boring like Brahmin religion,
Yeah,
reconstructed Brahmin religion.
okay, so if you are a Brahmin, you have to follow
Which you are.
which I am. You have to follow very, very, very precise rules of cleanliness, right? And that's about 65% of what it means to be a Brahmin. You do not touch a Sudra. You do not let a Sudra's shadow fall on you as you go to the village well. You do not eat food offered to you by anyone other than another Brahmin or a king, or you know, in a in a pinch, a Vaisya, a virtuous Vaisya, and it's all a bunch of these rules. It's boring stuff, right? However, if you want to appear smart to your Brahmin classmates, what you say is, man, I've transcended the caste system, man. I now believe in 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 channeling Brahma directly. Okay? I'm going to dissolve my own Atman in the Brahman. Okay? I'll see you tomorrow. Okay? Now I'm gonna stop breathing and become God. That's Gnosticism in a nutshell for you.
Can I pick a cryptid that I want to talk about?
Great. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I want to talk about Mokele and Bembe and the idea of Mokele and Bembe being a dinosaur. Obviously, I would say like extreme Lazarus taxon stuff. It's really stupid to say it's going to be a dinosaur. And if you are a young Earth creationist and you're going to see you're going to say it's a dinosaur, and that's why you can argue it's a dinosaur. First of all, that's really, really Chad. And second of all, good luck with that. Anyway, now if we're going to talk about old Earth creationism, and the dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago, even if they were Pleistocene dinosaurs, which I mean, I'm sure that if they found some fossils from 64 or 63 million years ago, and they weren't redisposited, they would be destroyed by all the spooks of academia. But that's a huge gap. There's no way it would be a dinosaur, and it just pisses in the well, because the thing about Mokele and Bembe, or the supposed sloths of like South America, and a thylacine, for instance, in New Guinea, is there's uncontacted tribes there. And we know there is uncontacted tribes. First of all, how many uncontacted tribes do we know about? Or do we know about? How many do we not know about? Anywhere where there is an uncontacted tribe, I would not be surprised in the slightest if there's undiscovered megafauna.
I mean, there's over 1,000 languages in New Guinea. Okay.
Yes.
1,000.
So any weird giant monitor lizard or thylacine in New Guinea, or giant sloth in the Amazon or the Andean highlands, was not reachable except by helicopter, and there's uncontacted tribes there. Yeah, I'm gonna believe that there's a giant sloth there. That seems pretty freaking possible to me. Mokele and Bembe being a dinosaur, not very possible. Mokele and Bembe being like this really big long neck monitor lizard, possible. Mokele and Bembe being some kind of aquatic forest rhino, possible. Mokele and Bembe being a Lastharian, possible. That's definitely something that's in the reign of possibility. And maybe we should give credit to it, especially something like the thylacine. And kind of a problem of cryptozoology is where you have all these young Earth creations going into the Congo to search for a hidden dinosaur to prove that the Earth is really 6,000 years old. It kind of pisses all over the place of, well, there's 5,000 confirmed, well-regarded sightings of the thylacine throughout Tasmania, New Zealand, and Australia, and this animal, the last captured subject was in 36 and it was declared legally extinct in 86. So if people are still seeing it, first of all, that's a high priority, and second of all, you want to save, it's a high probability and a high priority, and you want to save that animal. You don't want that animal to go extinct. And I think that the chasing after Mokele and Pempe is kind of pissed all over the saving the thylacine camp of cryptozoology, and that's kind of the problem with cryptozoology, is that it just has one foot where it's like trying to find these animals which may be really rare, and then a second foot into
So
let's
so
go find the goat man, bro.
so 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 if I had to compress what you're going to say, cryptozoology hasn't made up its mind if it wants to be a schizo science.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of the problem with the entire branch of speculative theology, to be honest. I mean, yeah, we don't.
Serp he's a real cryptozoologist. I'm the schizo. Like, I want to find the goat man.
I'm not saying the goat man's not real. I'm saying that there needs to be goat man studies on the side, and then finding animals in Laos on the other side.
They shouldn't
It shouldn't be
deliberately
conflated under the same umbrella.
Yeah, they need a split.
And it kind of pisses on, let's find this weird deer in Laos, or let's find this woodpecker that's supposed to have been dead for 80 years, and people hear it all the time in Arkansas. It kind of having them under the same umbrella makes it so that it kind of is you throw away the thylacines and the woodpeckers, and you go after the goat man and the Mothman. I'm not saying that the goat man's not real, but also if you're going to chase down the goat man, what happens if you find him and he kills you?
Well, you presumably try to live stream on Twitch TV first, and then.
Are we going to go out to the forest of Maryland and live stream our goat man expedition before we get slaughtered by him?
Yes.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
That's a very good way to die.
You got to go to the Michigan Peninsula. That's in the middle of the Great Lakes. Apparently, there's a lot of weird stuff that goes on there.
Oh, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that there's another cryptid that's has to exist if we're gonna both sides of cryptozoology. There's definitely cougars in the Upper Peninsula, for example.
Yeah. So, what are they called again? Vagrant species.
No, that would be just an animal that would just be, it's good at hiding. People are there's no more cougars on the East Coast. They got hunted to extinction. It's no, they are out there.
No, they all moved to Boston.
Yeah. Anyway, should we talk about the goat man? Do you know that much about the goat man mythic?
I've read stories. That's about it. I mean, I read a lot of stories about him just because there were sightings of him in southern and the middle of Missouri, and I grew up in Missouri.
Oh, tell us about him.
I don't know a whole lot about him. That he's a goat man. It's a lot of the stories are similar to I guess skinwalkers, but not so. There's not as much of an occult side to it.
Not as schizo.
Yeah, not as demonic.
It's just goat-headed Bigfoot.
Basically, it's a dude. Those stories I read were always the dudes who trained down in all the military guys. There's a training camp in Missouri, and they would always see him apparently.
Spooky.
Yeah, there's probably a CIA experiment that went wrong back in the 70s.
My favorite schizo story is the guy who was camping and the goat man saved him from a skinwalker. They fought each other.
Okay,
that's the hottest thing I've ever heard.
I gotta find that one.
Okay,
you should read that one.
That sounds like it's not true, but I want to believe.
Totally fake.
I thought a skinwalker is basically invincible, though.
Yeah, that's why it's fake.
Yeah, the native lore is the only way to kill a skinwalker is to discover that person's real name, and then you have to say it to them, and it will kill them.
Hey,
Isn't that like
isn't that
exorcism?
isn't
I
that
mean, that's how they did it. Basically,
more to the point? More to the point, isn't that like a Rumpelstiltskin?
I haven't read that one yet.
But
Surprisingly, I mean, I've read the story before, but I haven't read it in the original yet.
yeah, because the way Rumpelstiltskin was stopped was when the princess. I mean, my memory is very hazy on this. Is when the princess said his name out loud to him, and that gave him a certain and that gave the princess a certain sort of power over.
well, they talk about that. Like Father Riminger talks about that. Like, I mean, names have authority. That's why you
Yeah,
can't name your guardian angel. So
yeah,
there's some kind of truth to that. But on that point, it's like, as Catholics, we believe obviously the only people who can do an exorcism would be a ordained priest with faculties. But you always hear in these stories, like skinwalker stories, about, to take care of it, you go to the tribal elders and they will give you prayers or whatever, and it takes care of the issue. So what do you guys think about that from along those lines? Like, I guess folk exorcisms.
God can. I mean, God's giving them the power to heal.
Yeah.
I've heard basically the idea is that God gives them the power to heal the demons out of people, basically.
But my inclination is basically you remember how Christ. What we should remember what Christ said, which is that if a demon is kicked out, right, and the person doesn't get their house in order, it'll come back with 7 of its friends.
yeah,
Yeah. And that's sort of my inclination here. Like, maybe there are some cases where demons are casted out, outside of the true faith, but if those people don't convert or at least get their life in order, it's not going to do them much good in the long run.
Yeah, you can essentially bind it, but there's no protection from it coming back.
yeah, yeah. That is. I that kind of fits in with what we know, with some native lore from back home in India.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
This is attested to. It's not just us Catholics patting ourselves on the back.
No, it's happened like reasonably often where um where the local witch doctor, again, I don't want to say witch doctor because that's a feather Indian and not a dot Indian thing, but
Well, a witch doctor is a cross-cultural thing. It's just anyone who cures things caused by curses and all.
yeah,
I
well,
mean,
yeah, well,
isn't
Indian.
witch doctor a slur against shamanism?
Well, no, it's just witch doctors are specifically meant to cure stuff caused by sorcerers and the like.
Yeah, well,
Whereas shamans are people who, using certain, either hallucinogens or some kind of products, commune with the world of spirits. It's not quite the same thing. There's overlap, but they're not the same thing.
yeah, well, witch doctors in India will often burn some leaves or herbs, and they will often succeed in restoring um, the afflicted person to a state of normalcy and health. We aren't. It doesn't usually make the news how often that state of health lasts, but uh, there are some, back home, back in my hometown, where I know people who have been healed by witch doctors. So yeah, it's not just Catholics patting yourself on the back. Now, do I believe that this is another instance of Ecclesia Supplet that the church supplies? Yes, because there's nothing good that happens without Christ, right? So even if a Brahmin is saved, he's saved not by Krishna but by Christ. Um, so likewise with this,
Extra ecclesiam nulla salus. Extra ecclesiam nulla salus.
you know what? I'm not going to e- edit that out because because we
Y-
love our listeners and
Yeah, and I think it's necessary to emphasize.
yes,
Don't play with false religions, guys. Become Catholic.
yeah, just for the record, become Catholic. We have funny hats, we have bacon, we have Lent. And
Yeah,
so
I
so
mean, we also have exorcisms that work and
yeah.
eternal life.
we also have exorcisms that work and eternal life. But supposing you were so supposing your Saint Michael medal ran out of charge or something, and you came upon a cryptid in the wilderness, what would you do? How would you stay safe?
Run. Don't
Well, I feel like
don't
that
go
depends.
towards these things.
I mean, if it's like a straight up demon, obviously it's gonna operate like demons. So
Yeah,
if God wants it to torment you, then you're shit out of luck. But it's probably not gonna kill you. Now, if we're talking about cryptids like liminal beings that aren't necessarily demons, they might be some kind of temporal creature, like say Bigfoot. Then I'd
yeah,
say I don't think a Saint Benedict medal is gonna do anything. The same way it's not gonna stop a bear.
right.
Although,
I mean, obviously, if the goat man or skinwalker's going after you, uh, you know, pray a lot. But first of all, you shouldn't like. We
you
have a
shouldn't go
mutual
seeking
friend,
things
Knight
out.
Aaron, who once thought about chasing after this witch near where he lives. And he thought that this would be fun, and then he thought about, well, that would be a stupid way to die.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, you're going to go off in the wilderness and look for something, but if you don't know how to hike very well, then you shouldn't go off the trail, buddy.
And
Yeah.
yeah, aside from Mythic and Terilien and Menji, Night Errant, Gabriel, Simon, I, we are all very out of shape. So
Yeah, aside from Mythic.
I am not out of shape.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm out of shape. I'm just not in my best shape. But yeah, the rest of us are all out of shape.
yeah,
I could do better.
Yeah. Yeah, Mythic is in fantastic shape.
so
But don't search for cryptids. That's the thing. It's
Yeah,
like you
well,
don't go out of
I'll,
your
you know,
way.
I'll put it to you this way: would you go out of your way to fight a bear?
No, I mean I'd hunt bear,
No.
sure. But
Okay. How much worse would it be to go and fight a cryptid?
Okay, let's say we're going to say find Bigfoot. Let's say Bigfoot is a real creature, right? So if you hunt down a mountain lion without a gun, what could happen to you?
you're gonna get raped.
What's gonna happen if you chase down Bigfoot without a gun? Or with a gun, because supposedly Bigfoot's supposed to be able to really confuse people. Good luck with that. It doesn't seem like very safe animals to be around.
Confuse people in what sense?
Bigfoot's supposed to cause like really he's supposed to cause people to be either very confused or be panicked. There was a guy on YouTube that was suggesting that like there's a natural reason for this, in the sense that tigers and other big game cats can cause sounds that we can't necessarily hear, but what cause like damage to our ears and cause
there's
us to go into panic.
frequencies that can induce fear and stuff.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And Bigfoot physically might be capable of doing
Like
this
rap
because
music?
it's
Oh my
I mean,
God.
not
Oh.
due to being garbage, but due to being an actual hunting technique is that they can induce fear. So if
Terilien,
you're going
don't say it.
towards
I'm gonna
Okay.
say it.
Joggers!
Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, joggers, they have that special ability to hunt people with weird frequencies when they carry their boom boxes. I'm sorry, I had to.
Yeah.
Well,
We did
Go-
say
go,
this was a
guys, go.
racist Tolkien podcast. Anyway, please go on. I am so sorry.
well. Anyway, when you use a boombox, or when they use their natural boombox as tigers, they can cause you to go into panic and make you very nauseous and sick.
Tigers?
And yeah, tigers can do this.
Dude, I had no
So
idea.
Bigfoot does this to people as well.
I had no idea tigers could do this.
Yeah.
And they could do it to people.
Yep.
That's amazing.
That's
Yeah. I mean, you shouldn't chase down tigers unless you're a tiger chasing specialist.
I mean,
Now,
as
Bigfoot's probably as dangerous as a tiger.
well, probably
mean-
significantly more.
I mean, at least as dangerous as the tiger.
Yeah, I mean, tigers are insanely dangerous, though. I mean, you grew up near enough to tigers, didn't you?
Yes.
Frere?
Yeah.
How many times? So I have a question. I mean, we're just going like grotesquely off topic.
Hey,
I'm sure
this
it's gonna
is what
be
this
fun to
podcast
listen
is
to.
for. Yeah,
But-
this is what this podcast is for.
So I've always noticed, as far as like Asians, Indians, despite how poor and how shit-filled the streets are, seem to take a great deal of care towards the natural environment compared to, say, Chinese or Southeast Asians do.
Yeah.
It's the Dharma. Dharma
Yes.
be like that.
Isn't there like people with machine guns that like defend the lions?
Pretty much, yes. Yes, my country does not. My country hates poachers.
That's based.
Yeah, I hate poachers too.
One of my least favorite white nationalist canards was where they would like be like, only white people care about the environment, and it's like I think Indians care about it more than like English people do.
For the vast majority of human history, Indians and East Asians cared far more about the environment and animals than we did. And I mean, it probably comes from the fact that they were followers of influenced by Dharmic traditions, which place a strong emphasis on not harming even animals, whereas we followed a Abrahamic tradition. And I don't mean that pejoratively. I mean, I am a Catholic, but I mean, it is true that Dharmic traditions emphasized care for animals more.
Well, I mean, yeah, we look at animals as God gave them to us, and we have authority over them, and I think that gets abused sometimes.
Yeah, like it lends itself to certain kinds of abuse.
Can I just restate something?
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is just to clarify, but this is one of the reasons why Abrahamics know they can't be real Nords.
Says the darky. Says the cursed son of Ham.
So,
Oh my god.
so is there a lot of cryptids of India?
Well,
What was like the thing where there was the monkey man that walked
yeah,
through Delhi?
I was just about to think about that. Again, we don't know what happened to the monkey man. People just kind of lost interest after a while.
Was this like a long time thing that was happening in Delhi? Was this like
Um,
months or years?
months, probably months.
So was there literally
a
just some
little
kind of
more-
monkey man?
A little more recently, there was this creature called the Bhoot Billi. What that means is a ghost cat, and it was supposed to be a cat human monkey hybrid that just scratched and wounded people and gave people rabies. And that just happened several times. This, funnily enough, was around this was around 2002, 2003, which is exactly the time when India had its largest frequency of UFO sightings. Now, incidentally, that's exactly the period of time when Discovery Channel would broadcast UFO shows for hours and hours on end. Um, there's a correlation. I'm not sure if 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 there's a causal chain in there somewhere, but
Meme magic.
meme
I don't
meme
know.
magic, yeah, meme magic. I mean, that,
Does I think it's called the Mahdi Barung.
oh, what's
There's
that?
supposed to be Yetis seen in northeast India.
Oh yeah, Yeti's the abominable snowman. That's that. They're pretty big in the northeast of India, but people they just so Hindus nowadays are busy killing Muslims and talking about um, bombing Pakistan and asking white women for pictures of their breasts on Facebook. So
You're
um,
not really interested into the Yeti?
they aren't interested in the abominable snowman
Much more
anymore.
interested in Bob's and Vagine.
Pretty much, yes. And so, so if an Indian man ever comes face to face with the abominable snowman, what's he going to say? Is he going to say "show Bob" or is he going to say "bitch lasagna"?
Anyway, do you believe in Yeti since it was closer to where you grew up?
Oh yeah, I mean it's only like a couple of 100 miles. So about 350-ish miles north of my city is where the eastern Himalayas begin. It's a very, very, very densely forested region. So yeah,
I could literally just like drive for like 30 minutes and like be in the so-called Bigfoot territory.
yeah. From
What's the
it is
difference
very
between a
close.
Yeti and Bigfoot?
I think they're seen universally everywhere. I don't know if there is a difference.
Well,
Maybe there's like a height difference or something.
there's
Yeti's
also
supposed to be white.
yeah. I was going to say there's supposed to be
Arian.
difference in color. Yes.
Aryan Bigfoot.
Yeah, the Yeti is the Aryan Bigfoot. Yes. So 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 um another another thing since we brought up the succubus issue, um what likelihood is there that cryptids can breed with human beings? Now, we will be discussing this at length in our next episode. We will have another guest on, and if you guys want to come on, you can come on again. And we will be discussing a book in the next chapter, um, Demoniality by Sinistrari. Now, in order to tease that, I'm going to ask: is it plausible that cryptids can breed with people? And when I say cryptids, I mean cryptids in the broadest possible sense. So, right from um, Bigfoot
I mean,
to
it's in the
Goatman.
Bible.
So
Ooh,
I think
Nephilim schizo posting. I love it. Okay, go on.
I mean, it's in the Bible. The traditional and overwhelming patristic interpretation is that Genesis 6 is referring to angels breeding with men, and not Augustine's interpretation, which is the idea that it was a breeding between the line of Seth and the line of Cain. Uh, yeah, yeah. I mean, it is possible.
Although,
How it
but that
occurs,
that
I
is the most
find no.
more popular now.
Yeah,
doesn't Bigfoot kidnap women and have sex with them, and then fairies have halflings, and gray
yeah.
aliens have
Like
halflings as
it's
well.
so universally attested,
Yeah.
which of course is further evidence that they're not just aliens.
Also, I think there were, some of the more scientifically inclined cryptid followers would say that cryptids are that the Bigfoot and Yeti and Alamos and Yeren and all these creatures, in fact, remnant relic populations of Neanderthals. So, in fact, they're raping women to be more Aryan.
Well, similar
The hills have eyes.
behavior. Well, similar behavior has been shown by more well, less urbanized populations. So yeah,
You mean more urbanized populations?
less urbanized populations who,
Oh, okay.
you know what I mean. Everyone here knows what I mean.
Yeah.
So yeah, so yeah, you know, sometimes you just want to go for a jog and then you see a nice white woman and you take her home with you. Just 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 hit her on the head with the pack of menthol slims that you were carrying from
Oh
the store.
gosh.
Yeah.
Aw. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah,
So 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 next week
yeah.
we are going to um do it weekly. So yeah, so if we can't manage it next week, we'll see. Um I have several topics lined up. I have several things to say by myself as well. In particular, I would like to expand on um, uh, UFOs and demons because there are many points that we were not able to touch on in this episode. But yeah, well, well, we will be seeing you when we'll see you. And thank you, Menji Mythic, for coming on.
Thank
It
you.
was great.
Oh yeah.
Go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to me, and subscribe to my BitChute channel, Serp Curb.
Okay, we will be posting the link to that, and we'll also be posting the link to Mythic's Telegram channel, where he posts some screenshots of schizo posters on X who tell their run-ins with demons and cryptids and skinwalkers and African Americans. So yeah, we well
Indians are always so much more racist than we
for
are.
good. I mean, dharma literally sanctions racism. It
It's the
literally
thing.
sanctions racism. Yeah.
How much do you like with the internet and with high caste Indians that can speak English? Will the alt right be overtaken by Hindus?
Yes.
Well, we do need to remove the Filipinos from the positions of power first. So, yeah, so between 2014 and 2021, the alt right has been an overwhelmingly Filipino movement. So we need to change that. We need to replace them.
Based.
Yeah, and that's about it. We shall be seeing you again next week. From the edge of the Midgewater Marshes, we were, or we have been, Nice Beam Friar and Terilien, your hosts, with Menji Sarpkarp and Mythic, our guests. Bye bye.